Hi there, students. I've been looking at the first lessons that have appeared, the peer evaluations that have appeared in the Dropbox, and I'm really very impressed with the feedback you've been able to give each other. Very effective use of the checklist, very astute, and for the most part, very clear and explicit instructions to your partner. I'm really very impressed with the quality of the work. An area that I note continues to be fairly problematic. It's a little bit difficult for evaluators to suggest solutions. I think you have all been very good about identifying problems that you see in the language objectives. But it's a little bit difficult to explain to people how to fix that. So I'm going to take a little time here to go over this area of language objectives so that you can both shape your own language objectives a little more effectively before you get to peer evaluation, and also will have a clearer model for helping your colleagues improve their language objectives if that's an area that you identify as in needs of improvement for helping everybody get full points and the best possible grade in the course. Here we have language objectives, which are fairly common. I'm seeing these quite a bit, and they really cover the language domains, which is what we want to see, and as they're to participate in a class discussion, complete an essay, and complete a worksheet. So the first thing that we want to do with these language objectives is we want to turn them into activity statements. So the first thing we're going to do is use the tag SWABAT, student will be able to, and we're going to rewrite these in terms of these activity statements. So students will be able to participate in discussion, student will be able to complete an essay, student will be able to complete a worksheet. Now these are not yet explicit enough for our goals for SIOP lessons, and so let's look and see how we can improve these in order to make them more explicitly tied into the specific content of the lesson. So in this first lesson that I am thinking about is on the solar system. And having gone through and looked at the activities and the eventual assessment of the lesson, these are the things that I can see that students are going to need to be able to do that will speak to a particular language objective. So in the first one, instead of simply student will be able to participate in class discussion, we now include the very particular content on the solar system describing the appearance of the 8 planets and Pluto and their order from the sun. So now we have something very explicit, very accessible. You will know, it will be very easy for you to observe and note that students have completed and met that learning objective. And the same with number 2. Students will be able to complete an essay on the planet of their choice with a description of the planet including appearance, order from sun, and additional interesting facts. And our third objective, which was to complete the worksheet. What kind of worksheet? On the solar system with facts based on the material studied. But we're not quite done, because we know that we have to differentiate our language objectives for the 3 levels of ELL. And those 3 levels are beginning, intermediate, and advanced, or recast using the Arizona proficiency levels on the English language proficiency benchmarks. We collapsed the 6 levels that they provided us so that pre-emergent and emergent are our beginning levels. Basic and low intermediate are our intermediate levels, and high intermediate proficient are our advanced levels. And the little acronym underneath, PE-E, BLI, and HI-P correspond, of course, to those labels: pre-emergent, emergent, basic, low, intermediate, etc. So now we can go to our website and look at these benchmarks and get a sense of what kinds of things can we do in order to differentiate these benchmarks for our beginning, intermediate, and advanced kids. So let's go to the website and see. This particular lesson was geared toward a 3rd to 5th grade class. So I am going to look at stage 3. Stage 1 corresponds to kindergarten, stage 2 to 1st and 2nd grade, stage 3 to 3rd through 5th grade, and you can see stage 4 is middle school and stage 5 is high school. And our first our first language objective had to do with a classroom discussion. So that's going to be in the listening and speaking domain. So I'm going to pull up the listening and speaking domain. Now on the first page, when we get to this website and this link, we have again the proficiency level descriptors, and they are the 6 we've been talking about. High intermediate, proficient, low intermediate and basic, pre-emergent and emergent. But when we get to the actual descriptors, we'll see that the proficient level has disappeared. And this makes sense because a proficient student probably does not require scaffolds very different from any of our English-only students. And so these benchmarks are really focusing on those levels that require instructional scaffolds. But we're still going to refer to our 3 areas. They're just going to be pre-emergent and emergent, corresponding toward our beginner students, basic and low intermediate, corresponding to our intermediate kids, and high intermediate being our advanced students, because our extremely advanced students, again, will not need scaffolds that are particularly different from those of any of our students. So now as we go down the chart, we can see that this first area, looking at the left side sidebar, comprehension of oral communications, that would be a discussion. The first part here is all about phonemes. That's linguistic, don't really need that. The second part is responding to read-alouds, paraphrasing from read-alouds. That is not what I'm looking for. I go to this next and I see that this will work because we're talking about presentations, read-alouds, presentations, and conversations, and I see that. For my pre-emergent, sequencing a series of pictures. Emergent, using pictures and keywords. We've talked a lot about that. Looking for my basic students, sentence frames to sequence. Okay, I've got ideas about how I can apply this to my lesson. Now my low intermediate are going to be sequencing events, using complete sentences, and here my high intermediate are doing similar kinds of activities, similar kinds of language tasks. And now I'm going to go down here and look again and see if there's anything. Okay, these guys are identifying and repeating. These guys are retelling and paraphrasing. And then my high intermediate are summarizing. Okay, that helps. I'm taking little notes on this and come down to see if there's anything else here. They're using keywords and the academic vocabulary, which for us is our key vocabulary. Here they're asking questions and demonstrating relationships. Well, let me go back now to my question, my language objective. Students will be able to participate in class discussion on the solar system, describing the appearance of the 8 planets in Pluto and their order from the Sun. Now I need to remember that my 3 categories, my 6 categories have been collapsed now into these 5, but I still have the 3 levels. So I'm going to be looking at objectives for pre-emergent and emergent, basic, low, intermediate, and my high. Well, going back to those charts, I can come up with this for my pre-emergent, emergent. They're going to have picture word key cards to participate in the scaffolded discussion with teacher and peers. And my basic and low intermediate kids are going to be retelling and rephrasing using prepared sentence frames. And then they're also going to use canned questions in order to guide the discussion with their peers. So they'll be able to facilitate the discussion by having canned questions of a level appropriate for both high intermediate students, which will stretch, and pre-emergent and emergent students, which will allow them to facilitate and participate in the conversation and the classroom discussion. And then I can look at my high intermediate kids, and they will be presenting and summarizing key concepts in the complete sentences using key vocabulary. So here we have the same language objective with these 3 opportunities so that all levels of our students will be able to participate in this, will be able to participate in the class discussion, and I will have very specific objectives so that I will know whether or not that student's participation has been adequate and whether or not I need to provide additional scaffolds for those students to meet my language objective. Now, we can go back, we could go back and look through, and we should go back and look through the other adapted and expanded language objective using the English language proficiency model at the AZ DOE site, and using again the charts in order to identify those particular and explicit language objectives that correspond to the skill level of our students. So one thing that we want to think about is limiting our objectives, our language objectives, so that they are very particular and very explicit. It's not necessary to have many language objectives for a lesson. In a way, it clogs up the lesson and makes it less clear that you are moving toward an identifiable objective. It's more important to have fewer clarified objectives. You do, however, need to make sure that your objectives do correspond to those domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We want all language domains represented in each lesson. So I hope that this has been helpful, and that if you have further questions, you won't hesitate to contact me.